Namaste, 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 everybody tuning in, whether you're here in this moment or indeed through recordings all over the world. As you probably know, my name is Stewart Pearce, and I'm the captain of this ship in the sense of during deep dialogues, during the COVID experience that we all went through 6 years ago. The Angels of Atlantis, who I channeled for 40 years, gave me the inspiration of creating a podcast called Deep Dialogues. And guess what, Jeralyn? As this all happened, I was having these remarkable conversations online, on Zoom, with people all over the world, some of whom I knew, hadn't spoken to for years, and some who are new. And I noticed in our conversation there were these extraordinary vibrations taking place, hence deep dialogue. So we dropped right into the soul of our conversation. So that's where it started. A little bit of illumination for those listening in. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm an international voice coach, but also an angelic emissary. And we have with us the wonderful Jeralyn Glass, who was a performer at some point in her chronology on both Broadway and in opera. So she's a professional musician of unquestionable musicianship. But in 2015, she had a remarkable experience where her dear son decided to pass into the great blue beyond, into the higher dimensions. So he left his physical body, and she will reveal to us, because obviously it's her personal story of some acclaim, she will reveal to us what that energetic experience was all about and how it opened up a pathway of extraordinary beauty in relation to all of the beautiful beings, the entities that you see behind her, these wonderful, wonderful crystal bowls. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Welcome, my darling.
Thank you, Stewart. This is such an honor, and I'm just excited to share deep dialogue with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So as we expressed in our pre-show chat, sound. What was the first awareness that you had of sound? The first sound maybe that you remember you hearing?
I mean, I remember very, very clearly as a little girl, three years old, I was twirling around outside on our porch, just twirling and singing and moving my body. And I felt a deep connection to the divine, to something beyond myself. And it felt like so much love and so much like I was held. And I heard a sound, I heard a voice that said, this will be your life. This will be your life path. However a child understands that, I knew that singing and movement were going to be my path in life. And there was so much love in that moment, and I think that stayed with me all my life.
That's beautiful. How young were you?
3 and a half. Just a little girl, and then later we used to do shows for my parents. We do little performances, and okay, mom and daddy, so just watch us, and we dance and sing, and there was so much joy, Stewart, in the power of music. And yeah, then I got taken to a voice teacher when I was 11, and she was an incredible singer. She's still alive. She's going to be 104 in July. And her husband was a famous jazz pianist. He played for Ella Fitzgerald and Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra. So I grew up enveloped in this kind of love of the beauty and the joy and the power of music and of you as your own instrument.
That's beautiful. When you were at school, were you introduced capaciously to the beauty of sound through folk song? Or where was this, by the way? Where were you born?
In Southern California.
Southern California, right.
I grew up in Southern California. But as soon as I knew that I wanted to be on Broadway, I packed my bags and I moved to New York. And my parents were from Brooklyn. And my dad was like, why do you want to go to New York? We brought, we came out here to build our family. It's like, Dad, there's only one Broadway. And that's where I want to be. So,
it's interesting that would be the choice, meaning the choice of being in Southern California next to the Pacific. Yeah. And feeling all of those Lemurian or Mu currents coming through, and the great whale songs, which, they may not be overtly audible. That we're feeling the vibration of them.
Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna tell you a quick story. When I was in My Fair Lady on Broadway, and the star was Rex Harrison, the original. And he came to our home in California, and we made a lunch for him and everything. And we saw the whales. They were migrating, and we saw them, and he was like, this is incredible. And I since have gotten to swim with the whales in Tonga, and there's just something about, and swim with dolphins. Like I'm so connected to the sea, and my son's name was Dylan, which means born of the sea. And so just for you to mention that, just the fact of also playing bowls around the dolphins and the whales is incredible. But to experience their sounds, which are ancient, and healing.
Yeah, yeah. The Angels of Atlantis give me a lot of information about the essence and nature and the sacred geometry of Atlantis. And one of the things that they were revealing this week is in this whole series of radiant revelations that they call these channelings that come through me, that are all on the Angels of Atlantis with Stewart Pearce, for anybody who hears this. One of the inspirations that they gave were that the temples on Atlantis, a number of them had these huge channels, these water channels from the ocean into the center of the temples. And the whales would swim in and sing these extraordinary harmonics within the temple to bring about a particular purpose. So the sort of consanguinity between the humans of that time and these exquisite soul beings who are the swimming in Mother Earth's tears, as it were, the great oceans. It's just amazing. Of course, you and I both know how water is this sonic environment of the most extraordinary proportion, as we all know from our childhood, as going back to your childhood, of, when we were in the bath and we went under the bath water and started making sound, and suddenly there's this huge acoustic.
Right.
So whales are coming through very powerfully at the moment, as we know, in terms of healing our planet or orchestrating harmonic balances within the Gaia. So before you got it was principally your singing teacher who awakened you to that formal aspect. When I say formal, I mean the exterior aspect of what performance could be. Yes? Was that right?
Yeah. And she always, yes. And she always said to me, if you want to go into this field, you have to have a gut of iron, and she stressed to me how important it was that when the curtain came down, that you knew who you were, that you had a life, that you were grounded, that she really communicated that to me as a young person, and gave me an incredible technique that she actually integrated into her own teaching that came from a Swedish doctor, Dr. Vedin, who was helping stroke victims to recover their voice after the stroke, and using the lateral muscles, which as time has gone on, I've understood more and more how using the lateral muscles is bringing us into this whole torque field flow. So we have the lateral extension of the muscles. And of course, now in doctoral studies, it's been proven that when you use your lateral muscles, you have much more of the full potential and expression of your voice. But she taught me some pretty profound things when I was very young that I use to this day. So
I'm so into what you're saying, because one of my hobby horses about breath is that the way that breath is often taught is purely rectilinear, into the abdomen. And
right.
with the lateral influence, that because all of the work that I've done classically, in the classical speaking voice, particularly managing a theatre for 15 years, which was the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. But what I noticed with which I believe was also bel canto, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. The widening of the rib cage, and then that wonderful softening of the diaphragm, that the amount of power was extraordinary. When I first saw it, when I was a kid, as an actor in the early 70s, I missed out on a series of auditions for the repertory theatres in the United Kingdom, because at that time we had 52 repertory theatres. Today there are 2. However, that's where we learned our craft. And I missed a series of auditions, so I was out of work for about 3 or 4 months. And friends said, you can get a job at the Opera House And I said, what do you mean a job? What do you mean? I'm neither a ballet dancer or an opera singer. And they said, no, they need to rent a crowd. So I went for a meeting, and the person that I met was Franco Zevarelli. I mean, talk about being led by the divine. And the opera was Traviata. I was the page to Joan Sutherland playing Violetta. And so there I was holding her train because it was all in black and white. It was very Zeffirelli. And of course, I noticed how her back rib swing went whoom like that. And nothing moved in the front. And then this sound, this bel canto came out.
I mean, that is so funny because Franco Zeffirelli's production of La Boheme at the Met was the first opera I saw. And it was like, whoa, this is a world I need to explore. So even though my teacher had, I sang certain arias and lots of French and Italian and German songs, to see that production was incredible. And then I did kind of what you did, but not in the same manner, but I auditioned to be an extra in Jean-Pierre Pinel's production of Idomeneo. And so I actually got to, and it was with Hildegard Behrens, was singing the Electra. And she then became a mentor to me. And Ilia in Idomeneo was one of the roles that I sang later in my career. But wow, how incredible to just be immersed in the greatness of theater and the greatness of art and performance. Like you said, like, where are all the repertory theaters? Like art and this kind of expression, and then going back to using the lateral muscles so that you're really, I'm going to say it in a little more esoteric terms, but you're really planted and grounded in chakra 3. You're in your personal power. And I remember my teacher at Juilliard, and she was very famous. She said, support your voice. And I was like, how? Well, just use your diaphragm. How? Use it. Use your diaphragm. And when Annette, glad that Annette had taught me that lateral breath support, because that anchored me for so many things that I had to jump in in the Munich Philharmonic and sing arias that I hadn't sung before for a big New Year's Eve performance. And that kind of lateral breath support and rootedness changes your life.
Yeah. So I've got this theory, which I'll share with you apropos this point of the rib swing, the lateral, that we withdrew from this vital knowledge, this physiological or sensational knowledge, 350 years ago when Isaac Newton traumatized us all with the statement, the Earth is merely a lump of matter hurtling through space. Because we know up to that point, within the so-called medieval period, that whenever we were out of sorts, we went into nature, because everybody believed that the nature was full of the animating principle of the universe, i.e. God's breath. So they would dance, they would sing, they would spin as you did as a babe. And they normally did it next to a yew tree or a sacred node or a lodestone or a watercourse or a statue of Mary. And they felt better through praise, petition, and participation. But then suddenly, when we're told that the earth is not sacred, we suddenly went into that startle reflex. I, fortunately, like you, I had great teachers, particularly at Stratford, at the Royal Shakespeare Company, great teachers who showed me how we noticed that the larynx then became a crucible, which there was always open to its pliability, because that was where the impetus was. As opposed to, so many people who come to me, pros who come to me, whether they're singers or speakers, and they've overstretched themselves because they're nervous or frightened about the opening night. And therefore, I can't, which I'm completely compassionate about. And I say, well, what are you doing with your breath? And they're only breathing abdominally. They're only pumping into the abdomen. Sometimes to such a gross distension that they look as though they're pregnant, And so I said, okay, can you just, and they go, wow, that was easy. Exactly. How do you feel here? Oh my God, it's all the tension's gone. Anyway, so we're on to something cool. So there you are on Broadway and elsewhere singing. And that was going to be the rest of your life, of course, exploring as an artist. And then when did you feel that those extra currencies of sonic magnificence opened? I mean, you know what I mean, other than that we've just referred to, because there you are, surrounded by all of that sound. And it's not just the people on stage singing with you, it's also what's happening in the pit with the orchestra, the volume of sound. Where did you,
It's
you know what I'm going to, you know what I'm asking, when did it suddenly move into another sphere?
it's so beautiful to have this conversation with you. I remember singing in Europe. So after Juilliard, I moved to Europe and began a long career that took me all around the world singing classical music. And I remember moments, Stewart, where I recognized that this body was a human instrument, and these tiny little vocal cords, like you said, they had to be able to project without amplification over sometimes 100-piece orchestra in a 3,000 seat theater, right? And how do you do that? You become a vocal athlete. And I remember there was something so intriguing to me about, this isn't film, this is live. And you you got to show up and you have to deliver. You're an athlete, right? And then this connection that started to grow deeper and deeper of what I felt as a 3-year-old. There was this loving, loving presence of God. And I started to pray before performances, make me a channel, allow me to be open to the goodness, to the love, to the beauty, to the harmony, to the healing power that comes through sound vibration. And yes, it didn't matter if it was Mozart or Beethoven or Verdi or Puccini. It didn't matter. It was this pure sound coming through this human instrument, and oh my gosh, like you said, we're made of approximately 70% water. And so like later, when I came to the bowls and began to understand that the bowls make these harmonic patterns of sacred geometry, and that's coming through, it's coming through me, and it's vibrating and making these shapes in my own body. So hence others. And, how much does the human voice do that too? I learned that you have to have a pure intention, and that pure intention has nothing to do with your ego. It has to do with being in service to what sound is. And there was something so just life-changing about that. And the fact that you're a human vessel, as we all are, crystalline in structure, and sound pours through you, whether it's your own voice speaking or singing, or whether you're using crystal bowls, it didn't matter. And that introduction to crystal bowls happened about 19 years ago. I was traveling. I came back from Europe, and I was traveling with my mom through the Southwest, and someone was giving an example, an evening showing the crystal bowls. And I was like, Mom, okay, let's go. And she said, okay. And when I first heard the sound, Stewart, it was like what you mentioned from ancient Egypt. It was like my being on every cell of me knew those sounds, but I couldn't explain it. And that's another thing that I love and appreciate so much about music, is that it builds the bridge that takes us into the ineffable. It takes us into the place where the invisible, in a way, becomes visible, right? And sound connects us beyond anything we could ever really conceive here. It always puts me in a place of awe. It's incredible. So, I discovered.
I'm with you completely, and just to sort of inflate our excitement of what the universe, what Divine Mother, Father, God, Source has shared with us, that apropos, the invisible becomes visible. I had an experience. When would this have been? This was in the early 90s, I think, where one of the things that the angels promised me as they prepared me to hold their frequency was that when the student is ready, the masters will come. So people just bumped into me, literally, and I was in New Mexico seeing friends, walking through the plaza of Santa Fe. And this extraordinary man came up to me and said, I will teach you. And he was Native American from the Tewa. This is beautiful painted arrow, the sound shaman of the tribe. So I felt the bolt go through me as this intense man. And of course, I immediately to the impulse. So, context. One of the initiations that he gave me was to take me onto the mesa, where a trapdoor opened, which he opened, and he took me down 13 feet into his kiva. closed the trapdoor. We're in pitch black. He started chanting and the whole place lit up. So I saw what I'd always seen preternaturally, because I'm synesthetic, so I see sound. That's how it started with me initially. And then I began to hear sound and make sense as a child. Through a period of self-mutism for 2 years. I shut up for 2 years. And that's when I really began to see it through stillness and through getting heavy. You know, it's the first time I came in. I was 8, 9. And bewildering for my parents that I suddenly said, I'm now going to stop speaking, because obviously I speak a lot. However, so he took me through this huge process of understanding. I said to him, of course, oh my God, how did you do that? And he said, well, you see, with those harmonics, the pineal releases a phytoluminescent chemical. If our pineal is not calcified, I will work with you on releasing the calcification. He didn't teach me the sounds, but I suddenly realized, of course, that's how the tombs were painted in Egypt, and not through some clever burnished bronze, you know, priest standing at the entrance of the tomb and shining down to him and down to him and down to him. No, they chanted, because when I first went into the tombs, I was 15, all those years ago. It was 50 years ago, you know, and or more, whatever it is. And I could hear the harmonics.
Yes.
Now, we know that this is a meeting of incandescent splendor, you and I meeting. This was intended for us to meet. You can feel that, because we have complementarity on so many different levels, even though your unique experience is yours and mine is mine, which I completely respect in you. But there is a gift that we're being given in the use of harmonic. But before we go there, I'd love you to share with us how your dear one, how Dylan passed, and what that did for you, because so many people will relate, you know, because many of our dear ones are passing at this time. And, you know, and your perspective, I know, is highly unique with the way that you processed all of that tragedy through you.
I know, Stewart, when I think about it, it's something that no parent wants to experience, you know, and we talk about, because my mom just passed, and it's been a whole trip of going through that kind of grief, and it's totally different than my son. You know, when a parent passes, you feel like you lose your past. And if a partner passes, it's like you lose your present. But when a child passes, it's like you lose your future. And my son made it very clear on the night that he died, Mom, you didn't lose your future. We just have a different future. And I think I came to realize with him going so young, he was 19. He was a great musician. He played the piano, he played the guitar. He was a great singer. And he had a wonderful experience with the bowls, which I can share, when he had his voice change. But I began to realize, Stewart, that there is a much bigger picture to life than I ever conceived of. And as I said, as a child, I had a very strong connection with spirit. But when my son passed, it was like I came to understand, Mom, this was our sole purpose. And it's like, you know, I'll joke and say, no, I don't ever remember signing a soul contract with you that you're going before me. And when I see you, we're going to have a talk about it. And he just laughed, this big angel laugh. He was 6'3" and 230 pounds. He was a big young man. And he played football, and he was a ski racer, and he had 6 concussions. And I watched as he came into 16, 17, and then 18, that he was struggling with being able to concentrate. He was struggling. He started to struggle with depression. And he was like the leader of his class. Like, everybody loved Dylan, right? And in the end, Stewart, he chose to go. And of course, for me as his parent, there was so much like shame around that. Like, my goodness, what kind of a parent were you? And couldn't you in any manner, shape, or form save your son? And it's like, what's come in now so much. And 3 weeks after he died, I was on a big phone conversation with a number of people and a psychic. And she said, somebody here has lost a child. And it was like, yes. And the first thing she said was, you know, he was never going to live a long life. And every hair on my body stood on end. And she said, whether it was now 2 years, 3 years later in a car accident, he was never going to live a long life. You have a soul purpose. And it was like, oh my goodness. And as this began to unfold, it strengthened my whole relationship with God, with the divine, with what each of us are here to do. And, my son is very humorous. So he was humorous in this life, and he's a very humorous angel. I've written a book called Sacred Vibrations, and there's lots of stories in there of how he communicates. But on the very night that he died, I walked down to be near the ocean, speaking of water and the whales and the dolphins, to just try to find some kind of comfort, because you're in complete shock. It's like death is final. And yet we know it's not that it's final in this physical form, but spirit is eternal. And I looked up at the sky, and there was this huge shooting star, Stewart. Now, this is the city of LA. I've never seen a shooting star. I've seen them in the mountains, but not in the city. And I could hear his voice, Mom, it's like we always talked about. I'm home. I'm with God. And every part of me was just like, wait, what? And I heard through my right ear, and what he was referring to was as a child. So when he was 7, I brought the bowls home to Germany, where we were living. That's where he grew up. It's where he was born. And I'd bring him to bed with playing the bowls. So he knew them, and he'd like, Mommy, bring me to bed with my sound blanket. I want my tummy tickles. So like he knew those bowls inside out. It was like we'd pray together, we'd connect with the angels. It was a very mystical, beautiful time bringing him to bed with sound. So when that came through my ear, it was like, Stewart, what is happening? And, it's a process. It's been 11 years now. So it took time. And that journey was held by the sacred structure of sound. And I feel like being a musician and a singer and knowing those singing bowls, that changed the way I was able to process grief. And then I started to help others, and it just happened. And I've come to understand that is our destiny. Even though I say I don't remember signing that soul contract, I understand that it is, and he's as present with me as he can be.
Yeah. Well, we share, because this all happened, my awakening happened in 1979, when my performing career ceased. And it was to do with the fact that I was on Broadway, going to Los Angeles to star in a feature film. And the telephone rang as I packed up the apartment in the East Village to go to LA. And it was my brother saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, you know what I'm doing. I'm packing up. I'm going to become the world's greatest actor." Yeah, right. And he said, "Are you sitting down?" And everything went into slow motion. It was almost as though his voice was like, "You need to know, Mum's got terminal cancer. She's got 3 months to live. What are you going to do about it?" And she was my soulmate, you see. She saw. So she grounded me in the whizzing nature of me being preternaturally open from the word go, from the get-go, of seeing angels and being with fairies and so on and so forth. And my dad worked for the British royal family, so we were brought up in grace and favor in the royal palaces. So the first place that we lived in had been there since the 12th century. So there were a lot of dead people walking around. And it was my adventure playground. So I would talk to her about it, because I thought everybody saw what I was seeing as an innocent. And then she said, "Darling, I think we need to caution this and corral this energy." So she was the grounding mechanism for me, because I was way up. When she passed, the same thing happened, that it was an extraordinary rite of passage. And a week after, I was going through the mourning and sorting out the goods and the chattels. I won't go deep into the story, but there was a particular thing that I opened, and an experience took place. And automatically, the whole of the room, which was dark, became bright light, white light, silver white light. And there she was saying, "No more tears. I'm going to be mistress minding your career. Watch what happens. Breathe deeply, sort yourself out, get through the practicalities, just watch what happens." I'm telling you, I thought, what oh my God, oh my God. Made a cup of tea, drinking a cup of tea, telephone rang again. I mean, this is 79, 80. This is before digital. And it was a landline. And there was Cicely Berry from the Royal Shakespeare Company, this world famous voice director, saying, "Darling, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm being this." And she said, "Oh shit, what are you going to, what are you going to do?" Because I was in breach of contract with 20th Century Fox and had lost my manager and agent in New York City because they were up in arms about the fact that I'd done what I'd done. I'd left the US and come back to the United Kingdom. And so I said, "Well, this is what's." She said, "Oh, for God's sake, come and teach for me." And I said, "What?" So a huge door opened. And in the next breath, she said, "And there's this woman I want you to go and work with." I don't want to work with her. I'm a diehard socialist. And she's just become the, the leader of the Conservative Party. So 2 weeks later, I was walking into Downing Street and working with Margaret Thatcher.
Oh,
So,
wow.
the interconnectivity, when we're awakened through our groundedness. This was one of the great keys that you offered us, that Dylan said, get grounded, that in getting grounded, we're open to that facilitation of moving through the transcendental aspect, but not becoming caught in the fantasy of it, of
Right.
feeling where the instrument is mighty and wondrous and awesome, and that we're always looked after and we're never alone. And sound is one of the principal conduits.
Just what you just said, the grounding aspect, the anchoring aspect. If we're going to ascend this high, we have to be grounded. And I remember as a singer, just recognizing in my technique, like my teacher would say to me, "Stop listening to yourself." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "When you listen to yourself, you have the question mark on your back." No, what are you talking about? I didn't get what she was talking about. And she kept saying to me, "You have to learn technique through the feel of your body. And then you have to be able to repeat that feeling. Your technique is not made here." She'd say to me, "Nothing vibrates here, right? Your body is the instrument that vibrates." And so learning early on that grounding was an important aspect of all of what we're talking about. And after my son passed, you just want to be out of the body. I didn't want to be in here. The grief was so big, Stuart.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, something very interesting has just happened. As Jeralyn was in this amazing flow about the transcendental nature of sound and how important it is to recognize that our bodies are antennae, cosmic antennae, and that we as humans must be grounded or earthed. And of course, it's the fulfillment of the divine promise of the fact that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the sound was given to us way back, millennia ago. Sound was given to us through the divine logos, so that spirit could become matter. So if you see a slight glitch, we actually pause the recording, but the quality of our conversation will try and pick up where we were. But Jeralyn has just been scampering around dealing with the tech because it was on her side that something happened, which you and I both know that often this takes place when the frequency is really high and we're talking about sound and light together.
Stuart, I mean, this has never happened in all these years of recording. So this is, I don't know. I was speaking about the importance of grounding and the importance that technique is made in your body, in the very cells of you. It's not made by your thoughts.
Yeah.
And my teacher used to say, "Nothing vibrates here. You need to feel when you are free. You need to feel what your voice and what your body feels like when you're expressing from the divine. You need to feel what that feels like. And then you have to repeat that feeling." And so, a lot of times people will say, with sound now, with sound with the bowls, "Help me open my third eye." And it's like, yes, great. And we have to make sure as an instrument, as a human instrument, that we are grounded, because otherwise we can't sustain it. And so, these one-time highs can be incredible, but as you know, our lives and our jobs are dedicated to how do we sustain this eternal connection, this connection of light, sound, energy? How do we do that?
Okay. crucial question. You and I both know as practitioners that this is the big question that we're enticing and eliciting from our dear ones who come. How do you do it? How do you do it? How do you create consistency, constancy?
So it was interesting at the beginning after my son passed, when I would land so deep in grief and feel just this human anguish, I couldn't connect with him. And then that would freak me out. And then I would go into fight or flight and I'd be in a panic like, where is he? What happened? Have I lost it? Will I never be able to find him again? And I began to realize that there's a balancing act of elevating yourself, your vibration, your consciousness, your awakening, your awareness, and at the same time, rooting yourself. So, what did that mean to me? It meant getting on the mat and doing yoga, just putting myself in downward dog. Like when you think about just the sacred geometry that you see in Egypt and just all the things that create this physical, I'm losing my, like the goddess Nut, and you see the goddess Nut bending over on the temple, right? And the ceiling of the temple. And it's like, if I can go into downward dog, just simply that, and feel that consciousness is bending over upon itself and it's running up and down my central channel. If I can do things like heel strikes, like if I feel like, okay, the connection is big and I'm getting out of my body, just to do heel strikes, to go down into deep squats. So it's the movement that I began like as a child, this twirling around, okay, twirling, but at the same time I was holding on to that post. I was grounded somehow. So it's finding that balance of what it means to be in this human body and at the same time what it means to open every single cell of you to what we've been talking about.
So we've got, for all our dear ones who are listening in, what we're saying is that what's fundamental for the transitions that we're all going through at this time, which of course are extraordinarily elemental, because we know that something very remarkable is happening within our cosmos, within our galaxy, within our universe, within the Gaia, and within our bodies. And that the first thing we need to do is to develop a physical practice, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong or dancing, whatever it may be. I mean, go and do the tango, for God's sake, if you need to, because it's all about earthing. Go and do flamenco. But all of that, bringing in all of that celestial energy by the clicking and then the stumping of the feet to bring La Duende, the spirit of the Gaia, into our bodies. And of course, it meets right in the middle here, which is what we were talking about. But the physical discipline is crucial. Now, we both know that many of our dear ones are also of a certain seniority, and therefore their bodies may not have been moving for some time. And so the thought of dancing or going into yoga is hydrotherapy.
Right, but then you can sit where you are and squeeze the muscles of your pelvis floor.
Yeah.
And just concentrate on this feeling. Or if you're seated in a chair and you can't move, feel your feet connecting to the earth as if there's roots there.
Yeah.
That you just take this concept. I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
You take this concept of grounding.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. So be imaginative. We're talking about getting grounded, getting earthed, getting rooted.
Or like, I don't know if you would say like, just using the deeper sounds of your voice. So like when I'm using the deeper sounds of the bowls, those are rooting people. They're below the feet. They help you to experience this sense, what we're talking about, of grounding, whether you can actually physically move or not.
So what I'd love to do is just to add to that my passion at the moment, because the angels are, commanding me, as it were, with great humor, to work on opening up the pranic cord, really bringing in the breath very, very beautifully through wide and deep. And then, just as you said, of using the base chakra, of really going into that so the whole body becomes rooted. And of course, you and I know that with all of that breath and all of that muscular alignment, we become so tenderized here that vocal cords that haven't moved in that direction for years and years and years suddenly become really pliable. And the point is that when we've achieved all of that breathing and all of that sounding, all of that moving, there is this beautiful stillness within, where we begin to feel ourselves in connection with the great source, the universal field of light. Now, we're also teasing people into understanding the consistency. And I know earlier we exchanged the magical wand of flow. So for me, it's about breath, extending breath. For me, in the chant or in the extended sentence, because we know that we human beings, whatever language we speak, we always have enough breath for the thought that we speak. The difficulty today is that we're thinking in really short thoughts, that we're in this cognitive dissonance, and we're in short thoughts. So we're breathing in very short thoughts. Well, no wonder we're stressed out. We need to start breathing, interconnecting with the anima mundi that we were talking about earlier, the animating principle of the universe, God's breath. Because it says in Genesis, and God breathed into the nostrils of man, and man became a living soul. And God breathed onto the surface of the waters and brought forth life. So we need to get breathing in these extended ways. And then we calm down. We become even more grounded. And the rapid eye movement ceases, the stress hormone ceases, and we move into those beautiful endorphins. Oxytocin begins to move through our bodies. So we're en route towards transcendentalism.
I know. I think the biggest thing is when you slow your breath down. And of course, when we're living in the TikTok world, and very much everyone is working from some kind of fight or flight, when we begin to slow the breath down and breathe in that lateral manner. So it's the same muscles, your transverse abdominis, internal, external obliques, as when you laugh or when you gently cough. So for anyone that just wants to feel those transverse abdominis muscles, it's like when we can slow the breath down, the thinking mind begins to slow down, and just everything chemically in the body happens as you just described.
Yeah. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you're receiving a masterclass. You do realize that as we percolate through this wonderful conversation, you're actually getting a masterclass. Okay, cool. So we've got groundedness, earthedness, we've got flow. Now we're moving into the ecstasy of what the bowls are bringing us at this time, because we know that they're ancient instruments and that we would have used them on Mu, and we would have used them in some form on Atlantis. But for the last 20 years, suddenly they've all become part of people's consciousness suddenly. And it really are nudging us towards the fact that I really would love you at some point in this moment to play the bowls so that we can feel your majesty working, because of the awareness that you have of, you mentioned it earlier, repetition is the mother of skill. Just by going to the bowls and meeting the bowls, meeting the divine essence of the way that the bowls create the field of their own intention, which is in complete alliance with the divine. And then we can hear also, and maybe people will see the light and the colors because of the way that you're playing the bowls.
Right. And the fact is, when you are aware of the feelings, the sound, we don't just hear sound through our ears. We hear sound through every cell of us. So when we are aware of the feelings that get stimulated, and then we can later concentrate on repeating those feelings, that's how we build higher awareness. That's how we build the bridge to higher consciousness. So I'm going to play some deep notes that are technically in the lower octaves, and then I'm going to play some high notes. So Stewart, as you so beautifully said, we're working to connect this grounding of earth through the human body to the divine.
Beautiful. Thank you, darling.
So if you'd like to close your eyes, please do. And if you'd like to watch and experience as a sound concert, please do whatever feels comfortable for you. But I would like to invite you to allow your breath to slow down. comfortable, I invite you to make some sounds. You can gently hum. Follow your human instrument, unique, one of a kind. We each have our own vibrational signature. Allow your sound, your vibration, to entrain with that of the bowls. Beautiful Hathor singing bowl. Allow the sounds, the harmonics of ancient Egypt, the frequencies of love. Beautiful Hathor singing bowl. And gently bringing the palms of your hands together and rubbing them to generate heat. Perhaps you place a hand on your heart, on your throat, on your belly. Feeling the connection, grounded, centered, and expanded. Stuart, there's definitely, I don't know what the peeps were. This is, there's so much happening. Stuart.
There's there's so much going on. It's multitudinous. So what I feel, you see, is that we have an energy field. We know that our fields have conjoined, but there is this vast field that wants to pour through to us. And as a result, the vastness of it is distorting some of our technical accuracy, our technical acuity within our machines. Because you could see that my screen kept on flashing. I would disappear and come back. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful because we're being given this great gift. Although I would love you to have heard a little bit more finite purity of what Jeralyn is generating from the bowls and what the bowls are generating through her. The point is that all that we were saying about sound affects matter is taking place.
I can definitely send you a little recording, but I have never, in all the years, I have never had any of this happen before. It's wild. And I don't know, I'm feeling my son, I'm feeling my mom, I'm feeling this joy of, I'll tell you a brief story. When I played in Glastonbury, we did like a transmission, and I had some Lemurian seed crystal bowls. And after the transmission, which everyone, again, went so expanded, but at the same time very grounded, the Lemurian seed crystal bowl, I could not pack it back in the case. It had so expanded. So the bowls, they often nest, right? So when I pack and travel, let's say to England, so they'll go inside each other like that, like little Russian dolls. Well, that bowl, that Lemurian seed crystal bowl, and it was a D note, that had expanded so much that I could not get it back. I couldn't get it back inside the bowl. I had to, and I was like, this has also never happened before. So I turned the bowl upside down and I just let it sleep overnight, and then the next morning I could put it back in the stacking that I had come with.
Amazing, huh? Amazing. So the harmonics being produced through the crystal was actually expanding with heat, the silica, expanding, and also being aided and abetted by the Fae. Because as where were you playing, by the way? Were you you weren't actually on the tour? Were you on the tour?
We were actually in the building that looks out in the gardens.
Ah, we're in Glastonbury Abbey's
in the
garden.
Glastonbury Abbey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
And I had played up at the tour also, but the meditation, everybody was laying down in the Abbey there.
Yeah. Because we know that the Glastonbury, the glass mountain, is the portal into the Fae Kingdom. So they would be so jubilant that they would come and dance and sing, but, join with your frequencies. So, of course, all the other frequencies in this joined field would become expanded, and there we are. This is what happens. But of course, as we can see, to bring it to the groundedness of our beings, although the ethereal is taking place, we can see, therefore, that it's having a profound effect on the sacred geometry of our DNA and other aspects of our physical presence, particularly, as you were saying, through the fact that we're 75 to 80% water. And so, ladies and gentlemen, magic has just taken place. And unfortunately, we're going to have to move to a point of completion with our conversation. But obviously, this is the beginning of a number of conversations that you and I need to have to broadcast the magnificence and the miraculous nature of what we've learned, what we've perceived, and how we can help others.
And Stuart, what's so interesting as a musician, then I can say to you, if I'm playing bowls that are tuned to 440 hertz music today, or I might be playing bowls that have a 432 hertz tuning, which is lower, more like in the Baroque time. And then I play bowls that are tuned higher, which is 444, or we call it 528, which is what I was playing at Glastonbury. That makes a difference. The alchemies make a difference. The combination of notes. So here, what you heard now, what you could hear was a C major scale. And if I play a pentatonic scale, or if I play different combinations of notes, or say I play in the key of F, the key of the heart. Everything matters. And what I've come to learn in my journey with music as medicine is that there's no one size fits all. Today, you might like to hear and you respond super deeply to the C major set that Jeralyn played, or you might respond next time to a pentatonic scale set, and that takes you way beyond but grounds you. And that's the beautiful thing about music. It's what feels good to you. What do you love? Can you use these principles that you so eloquently share? I mean, I wish I could be as eloquent as you, about the grounding, about the centering, about the expansiveness, about connecting to the angelic realm, about connecting to ancient Egypt, about connecting to the whales and the dolphins and all these, the Bible, all these things where sound and harmonics and vibration are so much an integral part of. And how do we make that available for us today in this crazy world?
Yeah. Well, the great marker, I mean, I believe we're doing this, aren't we? We're being this, we're expanding, because this field of energy that we've created, that you're creating individual, I'm creating, but here we are joining, is going to be a vast field that's rippling out into the resonance of our planet and beyond. But also, one of my great preoccupations is how we can heal the cognitive dissonance, because all of our voices, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, everything's going really, really, oh my God, really? And this is...
Yes, I do know what you're saying. And that really like, wow!
Oh my God, and oh, that's weird. Oh, that's really weird. Oh my God, that's really freaky. We need to cease all of this and come back to the harmonic resonance of who we are. Because you can hear Jeralyn keeps saying, ladies and gentlemen, that this is tuning you back into your signature frequency. This is the way that your soul meets your physiology. This is a physical geometric principle that we are lucky to have had the experience of defining. What I do is I tune everybody into their note, their signature note, for speech. But we do it through feeling, where is the harmonic balance of the diatonic? Where's the harmonic balance in the body? And of course, guess what? Rumi was right when he said, if words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. But of course, that's the sound of the cerebral world, that we're in the digital world that we're living through.
It's like when my teacher said, nothing really vibrates here, but it's like, Stewart, nobody teaches us. We know how you tune the piano. We know how you tune the orchestra. We know how you tune the guitar, but who teaches us how do you tune the human instrument? And that this instrument, it gets out of tune, and when I was sitting in the grief, it was like, who wants to go in there and feel that? But when you allow yourself to feel the myriad of emotions and experiences that we have, it helps to tune us if we do it with consciousness.
Yeah. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is ancient wisdom being made palatable for modern daily life. You can hear the credence, the integrity in what Jeralyn is saying, and hopefully what I'm saying. Now, how do we find you? I'm sure that Ryan's prepared and he's going to bring up your website on the page. This is the best route in, isn't it? Through your website. Is that what we're going to do, Ryan? Ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking, who's he talking about? Some disincarnate spirit. Well, in a sense he is, but he's my tech manager who's hovering in the background. So it's www.Jeralyn. Oh, here we are. Thank you. Thanks, darling. Thank you. There we are. This is the best way of finding you.
Jeralyn Glass, and then crystal cadence is the sound. So, like, this is the book that I wrote. That
sacred vibrations, right?
This is a little F note, right? So you see that this image of this F note is what would appear in the fluids of your body when you hear that sound. So that'll take you, Jeralyn Glass will take you to crystal cadence. That's the main sound sound healing website.
Fantastic. And it's a beautiful website, ladies and gentlemen. You know, before coming to meet Jeralyn earlier on, yet again, I was tuning in and feeling through the landscape of the website. It's beautiful and highly intuitive and very accessible. And don't forget the Sacred Vibrations, her book Sacred, can be found on Amazon. So unfortunately, for this particular time phase, we're going to have to complete. Before we go, ladies and gentlemen, so this is, you can see, a platform of the deep dialogues that I was giving an intro about at the beginning of our conversation, which is a platform for sacred soul stewards who are working to the tune of the octaval harmonics that Jeralyn is working on. And there are many, I think we have 450 conversations that we've had. So please go to, Ryan, I'm lost. Where do we go? Deep Dialogues on YouTube or deepdialoguepodcast.com. You can't miss it. And if you're in doubt, just go to the Angels of Atlantis. Oh, there we are. Thanks, Ryan. deepdialoguespodcast.com. And there are remarkable people like Jeralyn there. So obviously this, I can hear you all applauding everybody, and I know that you're applauding this wonderful lady and all that she shared with us, and how we will rejoin at some point soon for another installment of The Wonder of Sound with Jeralyn Glass and Stewart Pearce. To all of you, may God be with you. May the angels be with you and protect you. And please take the disciplines that we've offered into not just mind, but body. Namaste, namaste, namaste.